Channel we are in our blood physiology in our blood coagulation. So mainly blood coagulation takes place in plasma, we already seen. So actually what is the main mechanism behind this blood coagulation is nothing but, for example, when coagulation occurs whenever a vessel is ruptured or whenever a blood vessel is ruptured. So here the blood vessel is ruptured and it activates the prothrombin. Prothrombin is the one in the presence of calcium and platelets converts into thrombin. So thrombin is formed, and what is the use of it in coagulation is mainly soluble fibrinogen. It need to convert into insoluble fibrin so that it can form mainly the tertiary platelet plug, hemostatic platelet plug. So to this formation mainly we need thrombin. So this is how thrombin acts in between the soluble fibrinogen to convert into insoluble fibrin. So this is what you can say it again, overview of blood coagulation. And now we'll see some of the important glossary terms here, like euglobin. Euglobin is a simple protein that is soluble in a dilute salt solution and insoluble in distilled water. So soluble only in a NaCl solution, dilute salt solution, but completely insoluble in a distilled water, that is pure water. It is completely insoluble, that is the euglobulin. And heparin, it's an anticoagulant widely used. And vitamin K, one of the fat soluble vitamins that are needed for the synthesis of blood. Of course, they are needed for the synthesis of blood. Mainly this vitamin K is also useful in our platelet forming clots and also this coagulation process. If they are not present, even formation of clot will be difficult. So this kind of person, hemophilia, vitamin K deficiency causes hemophilia, and these patients will have continuous blood loss, and also they may have some microhemorrhages in the body. So we'll see only the important points because we already completed all of our theory in our before video. So conversion of prothrombin to thrombin, we know this process. Why? Because to convert the soluble fibrinogen into insoluble fibrin. So the rate limiting factor in causing the blood coagulation is usually the mainly formation of prothrombin activated. Only till the process of prothrombin activated, it is the rate limiting step in our process of forming coagulation. And you can see here the table like a flow chart to understand. So vitamin K along with the prothrombin activated, this prothrombin activated is the rate limiting step to remember, and the vitamin K along with calcium converts the prothrombin into thrombin, and in the presence of thrombin the fibrinogen converts into fibrin monomer, and fibrin monomer also needs calcium to form finally the fibrin fibers. So thrombin activated fibrin stabilizing active. Thrombin is not only useful to convert this fibrinogen into fibrin, even thrombin also produces a thrombin stabilizing fibrin stabilizing factor. This fibrin stabilizing factor can only be produced by thrombin. So this help in mainly the fibrin fibers to form the cross-linked fibrin fibers. Platelets get aggregated, and to stitch them like a sieve, like this, to form a network, we need the fibrin fibers. Mainly this is activated by fibrin stabilizing factor, which is also in turn produced by thrombin. So thrombin has mainly two functions. One is to convert the fibrinogen into fibrin, and another one is to convert the fibrin fibers to form the cross-linked bridges. So you can see here the same thing going on. So remember always that coagulation takes place in the plasma. And here we have either lack of vitamin K or presence of liver disease prevents the normal prothrombin formation and can decrease the prothrombin to such a low level that a bleeding tendency results. So if prothrombin is not formed, then the thrombin also will not form in turn. So mainly lack of vitamin K, not only lack of vitamin K, even liver diseases, because liver produces main protein like fibrinogen, all these things. So if even the liver disease is there, or even there is vitamin K deficiency, it will compulsorily lead to the bleeding disorders like hemophilia. And here you can see the thrombin platelets are mainly the fibrin stabilizing factors. So the fibrin stabilizing factors are thrombin, of course, and also platelets. Platelets are for sure, they take a top part in it. And next, coming to the action of thrombin on fibrinogen to form the fibrin. Mainly the thrombin acts on the fibrinogen to remove the four low molecular weight peptides from each molecule of fibrinogen, forming one molecule of fibrin monomer. So as we are saying always that fibrinogen is converting into fibrin and forming one monomer, then how it takes place? Mainly the main process behind it, that thrombin removes the four molecules from the fibrinogen and finally form the fibrin. So remember that it removes four molecules. And one more is the fibrin stabilizing factor is present in small amounts in normal plasma globulins, but it is also released from the platelets and entrapped in the clot. So that is one more important point I found. And clot retraction and expression of serum. Serum cannot clot because it lost. Serum is nothing but, once the clot has formed, and after the clot has formed, some liquid is oozing out without any coagulation factors. This is mainly known as serum. So always remember that serum don't have any coagulation factors. And platelets are mainly necessary for the clot retraction to occur. We already seen in our last lesson. And in addition, the platelets contribute directly to the clot contraction by activating the platelet thrombostasin. Thrombostasin is very important for a clot retraction. And also we required actin, myosin molecules, which are all contractile proteins in the platelets and cause the strong contraction of platelet spicules attached to the fibrin. So for the contraction of platelets, we need actin and myosin. These are the muscle fibers, and also mainly the thrombostasin. Thrombostasin is important for the retraction of the clot, which is also mediated by our platelets. And positive feedback, we have seen in the starting hemostasis, if you remember. Positive feedback examples are formation of clot. So how it is nothing but first the clot forms and it initiates the further more clot factors. Factors are giving again positive feedback to other clot factors. So like this is a positive feedback, that is enhancing the process. Finally, that is nothing but formation of a clot. So the clot initiates a positive feedback to promote more clotting. And the clot promotion is that the proteolytic action of thrombin allows it to act on many of the other blood clotting factors in addition to the fibrinogen. So this is the process. We know all the clotting factors we already seen. And now we will see the extrinsic pathway for initiating the clot and the intrinsic pathway. I have made this, like you can see here in pink color, a small flowchart like thing, so you can see. Actually, we'll see now the extrinsic pathway. In extrinsic pathway, first coagulation, intravascular tissue. Yeah, from here it starts. So first the tissue factor. Tissue factor initiates, activates factor 7A in the presence of calcium. Now this 7A in turn activates 10A. That is 10 factor, and 10 factor in the presence of 5th factor in turn activates 10. So this is a positive feedback mechanism. In the presence of 10A along with this 5, even the prothrombomodulin complex is also activated, and this is nothing but like a giving positive feedback. So in the extrinsic pathway mainly we have 7A, 10A, 5 in the presence of 5, and finally forming 10. So only 7, 9, 7, 10, 5, 10. 7, 5, 10, 5. 10. That's it about this extrinsic pathway. Some important points are like tissue factor or tissue thromboplastin. This factor is mainly composed especially of phospholipids from the membrane of the tissue plus a lipoprotein complex that functions mainly as a proteolytic enzyme. That's it about this. Here once we can see this flowchart to understand the extrinsic pathway. So first tissue, we got trauma. It has some cut injury. Tissue factor is activated. It in turn activates the 7 factor. Now this 7 gets activated. 7A means activated form. Now this activated form, because of this, the 10 factor in the presence of calcium gets activated in 10A. And this 10A in turn activates the prothrombin activator in the presence of 5A, as we seen before, along with the calcium, of course. So here what happens now, prothrombin converts into thrombin, and thrombin further converts the insoluble fibrinogen into soluble fibrinogen into insoluble fibrin, and also platelet phospholipids play an important role. So this is about the extrinsic pathway, very short form. And now let's see the intrinsic pathway for initiating the clotting. Here first we'll check out some of the important points, and later we will see the flowchart. So mainly the factor 8 is a factor that is missing in a person who has classic hemophilia, for which reason is called anti-hemophilic factor. Factor 8 is missing mainly in the hemophilia, so it is also called as anti-hemophilic factor. And the platelets are the clotting factor that is lacking in the bleeding disease, so it is called thrombocytopenia. So what kind of part is missing? The name is also according to it. As platelets are absent, thrombocytopenia. As factor 8 is absent, this factor 8 is called as anti-hemolytic factor because it's not present in hemolysis. So anti-hemolytic factor is a factor 8. And activation of activated factor 10. Action of activated factor 10. But factor 10 is activated, now it want to. It mainly forms a prothrombin activator role of factor 5. This step is intrinsic pathway and the same as the last step in the extrinsic pathway. So the step in intrinsic pathway is same as the last step, that is Activated 10A to form the prothrombin. Yeah, of course, because here 10 is activated, now it activates the prothrombin. In the same way, these both are equal. So that is activated factor 10 combines with the factor 5 and platelet or tissue phospholipids to form the complex called prothrombin activator. So factor 10 along with factor 5 mainly form the prothrombin activator. So here in this flow chart you can see that factor 5 along with this factor 10 together form a prothrombin activator. That's what we are talking about here. Prothrombin activator. So the complex is called prothrombin activator. And next, the role of calcium ions in intrinsic and extrinsic pathway. Except for the first two steps in the intrinsic pathway, the calcium ions are required for the promotion or accelerator of all blood clotting reactions. So calcium is a must required. And here you can see, however, when the blood is removed from a person, it can prevent it from clotting by reducing the calcium ion concentration below the threshold level for clotting. So if you decrease the calcium below the threshold level for clotting, then blood coagulation, it can be prevented from clotting. And either by deionizing the calcium by causing it to react with substances such as citrate ion, or by precipitating the calcium with the substances such as oxalate ion. So remember, with citrate ion and oxalate ion, we can cause deionization of the calcium. So here we will check out once our intrinsic pathway first in a flowchart. Later we will compare extrinsic and intrinsic pathway. So blood or trauma contact with the collagen. So first factor 12 is activated into 12A in the presence of kinogen, HMW, precalculin. It is now converting the factor number 11 to activated 11A. So nothing but 12A activates the 11A. 11A in turn, in the presence of calcium, it activates 9A. So in the presence of 8 also, of course, and 9A in turn activates 8A. 8A in the presence of calcium thrombin activated 10A. So platelets, phospholipids are also taking part here, and 10A, and in the presence of calcium thrombin finally form prothrombin activator, that is 10 along with 5 factor with 5. And here now finally what happens, prothrombin converted into thrombin in the presence of this prothrombin activator, platelet, phospholipids and calcium. In the name only you can understand prothrombin activator, activating the prothrombin. So once we'll see the intrinsic pathway and extrinsic pathway comparison. So intrinsic pathway first 12A activating the 12A, 9A, 8A, 10A along with 5A forms prothrombic activator, finally activator 3A. Even 3A also activates it. And in extrinsic factor you can see 7A acting on 10A, even the 5A act on 10A, finally form the prothrombic. So you can see this is a very short pathway, so very fast when compared with the intrinsic. And intrinsic is smoothness of endothelium in normal system inhibits it. If the endothelial system is very smooth, it may inhibit it. And also glycocalyx coat which is present on the endothelium may also inhibit this intrinsic pathway. And extrinsic pathway is mainly inhibited by the thrombomodulin. That is important to remember. So here we'll see some of the important points which I found. So the thrombomodulin thrombin complex activates the plasma protein C that acts as an anticoagulant by inactivating the activated factors 5 and 8. So factors 5 and 8 are mainly inhibited by a thrombomodulin complex, which in turn activates the protein C. It's a anticoagulant. So remember, protein C is an anticoagulant, mainly inhibits the factor 5 and factor 8. So factor 5 and factor 8 over here. So these are inhibited by thrombomodulin thrombin complex. And next you can see actually thrombin along with the antithrombin 3 is an anticoagulant. In the name only you can understand antithrombin means not allowing thrombin. If thrombin is not forming, you can understand it will not convert fibrinogen into fibrin. So it's an anticoagulant. In the name only you can understand. And heparin with antithrombin 3 is also an anticoagulant. So wherever you see antithrombin 3, you can fix it that it is an anticoagulant. So here we will see antithrombin action of fibrin and anticoagulant 3, the fibrin fibers that are formed during the process of clotting, and an alpha globulin is called antithrombin 3 or antithrombin heparin cofactor. So next the heparin. Now we will see about heparin. Heparin molecule is highly negatively charged conjugated polysaccharide. By itself it has low or no anticoagulant properties. And but when it combines with antithrombin 3, the effectiveness of antithrombin 3 for removing thrombin increases by 100-fold to 1000-fold, and thus it acts as an anticoagulant. So therefore, in the presence of excess heparin, removal of free thrombin from the circulatory bed by antithrombin 3 is almost very easy. And the largest quantities are mainly formed by basophilic mast cells located in pericapillary connective tissue throughout the body. These cells continually secrete small quantities of heparin that diffuse into circulatory system. And the basophilic cells of blood, which are functionally almost identical to the mast cells, release small quantities of heparin into the plasma. So now let's see the plasma causes lysis of blood clots. So plasma proteins mainly contain euglobulin, which is called as plasminogen or plasma fibrinolysin. And this is when activated becomes a substance called plasmin or fibrinolysin. So plasmin is a proteolytic enzyme which resembles the trypsin, and the most important proteolytic digestive enzyme of pancreatic secretion is our plasmin, and the plasmin digests the fibrin fibers and some other protein coagulants such as fibrinogen, factor 5, factor 8, prothrombin, factor 12. So therefore, whenever the plasmin is formed, it can cause the lysis of clot by destroying many of the clotting factor, thereby sometimes even causing the hypocoagulability of blood. So we know TPA. TPA we have seen before. It is a life-saving process in coronary or heart or brain strokes because of it has a capability of anticoagulability, that is it can break down the clots which are formed. Yeah, that's what they come to the same point. Activation of plasminogen to form plasmin, then lysis of clots. Yeah, of course. So TPA eventually converts the plasminogen to plasmin, which in turn removes the remaining unnecessary blood clot, and very useful life-saving process. And you can see the conditions that cause excessive bleeding in humans, mainly vitamin K deficiency. When a low vitamin K, then you have high chances. And hemophilia, of course, that is the disease caused by vitamin K deficiency. Thrombocytopenia, whenever the platelets are very low, then thrombocytopenia. And decrease prothrombin factor 7, factor 9 and factor 10 caused by mainly vitamin K deficiency. So if vitamin K is not present, even all these factors are also affected. They also come on decrease, and as they decrease, you can understand finally the clotting is affected. So you can see here that almost all the blood clotting factors are formed by the liver. Therefore, the disease of the liver such as hepatitis, cirrhosis, acute atrophy, that is degeneration of liver caused by toxins, infections, other agents can sometimes depress the clotting system so greatly that the patient experiences the development of severe tendency to bleed. So vitamin K is an essential factor to a liver carboxylase that adds a carboxyl group to glutamic acid residues on 5 of important clotting factors like prothrombin, factor 7, factor 9, factor 10 and also protein C. So upon adding the carboxyl group to the glutamic acid, the residues on the immature clotting factors. So vitamin K is oxidized and becomes inactive. So another enzyme, vitamin K epoxide reductase complex 1, that is also in short form VKORCl, reduces the vitamin K back to its active form. So in the absence of active vitamin K, subsequent insufficiency of these coagulation factors in blood can lead to serious bleeding tendencies. So vitamin K is mainly the fat soluble and is ordinarily absorbed into blood along with the fats. So one of the most prevalent cases of vitamin K deficiency is failure of liver to secrete the bile into GIT, which occurs either as a result of obstruction of bile duct or as a result of obstructive liver diseases, or lack of bile prevents adequate fat digestion and absorptions and therefore depress the vitamin K absorption as well. So thus liver disease often cause decreased production of prothrombin and some other clotting factors. So both because of poor vitamin K absorption and because of diseased liver, as a result vitamin K is injected into surgical patients with a liver disease or with obstructed bile ducts before the surgical performance is done. So ordinarily if vitamin K is given to deficient patient 4 to 8 hours before the operation and the liver parenchymal cells are at least one half normal in function, so sufficient clotting factors will be produced to prevent the excessive bleeding during the operation. And you can see hemophilia. Hemophilia is a bleeding disease, occurs almost exclusively in the males, and in 85% of cases it is caused by abnormality or deficiency of factor 8, and this type of hemophilia is mainly called hemophilia A or classic hemophilia. So in other 15% of patients with hemophilia, the bleeding tendency is caused by deficiency of factor 9, and both of these factors are transmittically generated by way of female chromosome. Of course, female only can carry them and male have this disease. that is our hemophilia. So therefore a woman will be almost never have hemophilia because at least one of her two X chromosomes will have appropriate genes. Yes, so if one of her X chromosome is deficient, she will be a hemophilia carrier, transmitting the disease to half of her male offspring and transporting the carrier state to half of her female offspring. So another bleeding disease with somewhat different characteristics is called Wall-Willebrand disease. Results from the loss of large component. And the injection of purified factor 8, the cost of factor 8. A patient who is suffering from this classic hemophilia, we can give an injection of purified factor 8. But this factor 8 is very costly because it should be gathered from the human blood and only in the extreme small quantities. So however, increased production and also nowadays use of recombinant techniques of factor 8 is making the treatment able for more patients with classic hemophilia. So before going to other part, we'll see the anticoagulant and antiplatelet agents. So you can see here anticoagulant and antiplatelet agents. So anticoagulant agents are like heparin, including low molecular weight heparin, warfarin. Warfarin is also called as coumarin and longs. So this mechanism of action for heparin is like it inactivates the thrombin and factor 10A, and it's called as anticoagulant. And warfarin, it inhibits the vitamin K and synthesis of prothrombin factors like 7, 9, and 10. So whatever may be, both are anticoagulants. They block this different kinds of factors. In the case of our heparin, it blocks 10A, and our warfarin blocks factor 7, 9, and 10, and also vitamin K. So usage we can use by intravenous immediate action, that is our heparin, and warfarin is taken orally, takes 4-5 days to complete a response. So it's was somewhat slow response, but its action is very high because given intravenously. So next, coming to antiplatelet agents like stopping the platelets are aspirin, dipyridamole, and teicoplanin. So aspirin, it inhibits the platelet cyclooxygenase, synthesis of thromboxane A2, so platelet aggregation is stopped, and dipyridamole inhibits the platelet phosphodiesterase, and ticlopidine inhibits the platelet aggregation, prevents the GP2B to 3A expression. As we have seen, these receptors are mainly important to bind the platelet to Wall-Willebrand factor. So if they are absent, platelet formation, clot formation will not take. So usage, mainly our aspirin is orally used in low doses, and even our dipyridamole and ticlopidine are also used orally. So these are the medicines to prevent the formation of clots. So next, coming to here, this is about the disseminated intravascular coagulation. So this is a DIC. It's a pathology. In pathology we can see it in detail, but now once we'll discuss. So DIC is nothing but like all the blood coagulation factors are already used in several formation of clots. As all of them are used there, in the same condition here, all of the platelets will be completed, and some of the platelets or coagulation factors which are required to clot the blood are insufficient. So in the same patients there is overuse of coagulation factors, and also there will be bleeding continuously. So you can see here, it's a peculiar effect of disseminated intravascular coagulation is that the patient on occasion begins to bleed. The reason for this is bleeding is that so many of the clotting factors are removed by the widespread clotting that the two proglobulins remain to allow the normal hemostasis of the remaining blood. So already in this patient they have already coagulation and also they have bleeding. So this is a rare case, its peculiar case is that its peculiar effect is mainly it is having two effects, showing bleeding and also have coagulation. So anticoagulants for clinical use, we use one of the most useful clinically, of course, anticoagulant is heparin and also coumarins. In coumarins we have our warfarin, so just now we have seen. So heparin as an intravenous anticoagulant. So injection of this relatively small quantities like about 0.5 to 1 milligram per kg of body weight causes the blood clotting time to increase from a normal to about 6 to 30 or more minutes. So it's having very high power, and the action of heparin lasts about 1.5 to 4 hours, and the injected heparin is destroyed by an enzyme in the blood mainly known as heparinase. Yeah, one more important point is citrate is always better than oxalates in the case of anticoagulants. Now let's see the coumarins, that is warfarins against anticoagulants like heparin or whatever. So let's see, when a coumarin such as warfarin is given to a patient, so the amount of active prothrombin and factors 7, 9, and 10 all are formed by liver and begin to fall. They start slowing down. So that's what they're showing anticoagulant property. And warfarin causes the effect mainly by inhibiting the enzyme like VKORC1. As discussed previously, this enzyme mainly converts the inactivated oxidized form of vitamin K to active form, so now active reduced form. So by inhibiting this VKORCl, warfarin decreases the available active form of vitamin K. You can understand when vitamin K is lower, it is nothing but prevents the bleeding. Bleeding increases now. So when the vitamin K in the tissue. So when this disease occurs, the coagulation factors are no longer carboxylated and are biologically inactive. So over several days, the body stores the active coagulation factors degrade and are replaced by inactive factors. So although the coagulation factors continue to be produced, they have greatly decreased coagulation activity. So after administration of an effective dose of warfarin, the coagulant activity of blood decreases to about 50% of normal by end of 12 hours and about 20% of normal by end of 24 hours. So you can see there is rapid decrease in coagulation factors. In other words, the coagulation process is not blocked immediately but must await the degradation of active prothrombin and other affected coagulation factors already present in the plasma. So the normal coagulation usually returns after 1 to 3 days after discontinuing the coumarin therapy. And you can see the prevention of blood coagulation outside the body. Silicone prevents the contact activation of platelets and factor 12. So whenever we put this blood in our silicone, it may not get coagulated for a few days because of this. And the two principal factors that initiate the intrinsic clotting mechanism, conversely untreated glass containers, allow the contact activation of platelets and factor 12 with the rapid development of clots. So heparin can be used for preventing the coagulation of blood outside the body as well as in the body. So heparin is especially used in surgical procedures in which the blood must be passed through a heart-lung machine or artificial kidney machine and back into a person. So the soluble oxalate compound mixed in very small quantity with a sample of blood causes precipitation of calcium oxalate from the plasma and thereby decrease the ionic calcium level so much that the blood coagulation is blocked. So deionizes the blood calcium which will prevent the coagulation. The negatively charged citrate ion is especially valuable for this purpose. Mixed with blood, usually in the form of sodium, ammonium, potassium citrate, the citrate ion combines with calcium in the blood to cause an unionized calcium compound, and the lack of ionic calcium prevents coagulation. So the citrate anticoagulants have an important advantage over the oxalate anticoagulants because oxalate is toxic to the body, whereas moderate quantities of citrate is injected intravenously. So after injection, the citrate ion is removed from the blood within a few minutes by the liver and it's polymerized into glucose or metabolized directly for energy. So consequently, there is 500 ml of blood that has been rendered incoagulable by citrate can ordinarily be transfused into recipient within a few minutes without the dire consequences. So however, if the liver is damaged or if large quantities of citrate blood or plasma are given too rapidly with fractions of a minute, the citrate ion may not be removed quickly enough and the citrate can under these conditions greatly depress the level of calcium ion in the blood, which can result in tetany and also convulsions, death. So blood coagulation test, we have mainly how can we do this? Let us find a clotting time. So we need to collect the blood in a chemically clean glass test tube and then the tip of the tube back and forth about 30 seconds until the blood has clotted. So by this time the normal clotting time is like about 6 to 10 minutes and the procedure using multiple test tubes have also been devised for determining the clotting time more accurately. Unfortunately, the clotting time varies widely depending on the method used for the measuring it, of course. So it's no longer used in many clinics because it varies. So instead, measurement of clotting factors themselves are made using sophisticated chemical procedures. So now we'll see the prothrombin and international normalized ratio. What is this? You can see a graph. So prothrombin time in seconds in a x-axis and y-axis you can see concentration percent of normal. So the prothrombin time gives an indication of concentration of prothrombin in blood and shows the relation of prothrombin concentration to the prothrombin time. The method is for determining the prothrombin time and the blood removed from the patient is immediately oxalated so that none of the prothrombin can change into thrombin. Then a large excess of calcium ion and tissue factor is quickly mixed with oxalated blood. So the excess calcium nullifies the effect of oxalate and the tissue factor activates the prothrombin to thrombin. So you can understand whenever the thrombin is formed, it converts a soluble fibrinogen into insoluble fibrin. So this reaction by means of extrinsic clotting pathway. So the time required for coagulation to take place is mainly known as prothrombin time. So this is what called as prothrombin time in a graph and the normal prothrombin time is about 12 seconds. So the tissue factor is isolated from human tissue such as placental differential batches may have different activity. So the international normalized ratio was devised to standardize the measurements of prothrombin time for each batch of tissue factor. The manufacturer assigns an international sensitivity index which indicates the activity of tissue factor with a standard sample. So ISI usually varies between 1 and 2, and INR is the ratio of persons thrombin time, prothrombin time to a normal control sample raised to the power of ISI. So you can have a formula here: INR is equal to PT test by PT normal whole of ISI. So this is a formula to use. UPT is nothing but prothrombin time. And the normal range of INR in a healthy person is like about 0.9 to 1.3. A higher INR level, like example 4 or 5, indicates a higher risk of bleeding, whereas a lower INR, like example 0.5, suggests that there is a chance of having a clot. So patients undergoing warfarin therapy usually have a INR of 2 to 3. So another useful test is a partial thromboplastin time or activated partial thromboplastin time, and this test the efficiency of intrinsic and common coagulation pathways. And since the intrinsic pathway is activated by contact with collagen, this test is stated by mixing the calcium and contact factors such as silica, kaolin with oxalated blood and observing the time taken for a clot to form. So this test is often used to monitor the treatment effects with anticoagulants. So other tests similar to that for prothrombin time and INR have been devised to determine the quantities of other blood clotting factors. In each of these tests, excess of calcium and all other factors beside the one being tested are added to oxalated blood all at once. So the time required for the coagulation is mainly determined um, in the same manner as for prothrombin time, the factor being tested is deficient, the coagulation time is prolonged. So the time itself can be then used to quantitate the concentration of factor. In general, the approach to patient with disorders of hemostasis is a logical one. So first to clinically define whether the bleeding or clotting disorder is present in the patient. And then only they can define them by laboratory tests such as INR, PTT, as well as more complex assays, the nature of the clotting disorder. So this is like always simple examples, not so important, interesting. So you can see the comparison of bleeding and clotting disorders. So is the test here the bleeding disorder, clotting disorder. So first we have a family history. It may be rare. Bleeding disorder is rare in the case of family history, and clotting disorder is always present. And bleeding from superficial cut is profuse in bleeding, and in clotting it not usually increased. And petechiae, it's usual, not usually increased. Petechiae means like small red dots. Deep hematomas. Deep hematomas are rare in the case of bleeding disorder but usual in clotting disorders. And bleeding into joints, hemarthrosis is rare in bleeding and usual in clotting. And bleeding time is prolonged in bleeding, normal in clotting. And clotting time is normal in bleeding and clotting disorder is prolonged. What is prolonged? Our clotting time is prolonged. So finally we have come to this flow diagram of diagnosis of hemostatic disorders. So clinical history, dividing it into bleeding time and clotting time. So bleeding time is increased, platelet count, platelet function, steroids. Clotting time is increased, partial thromboplastin time, plasma thrombo time, international normalized ratio, always of fibrinogen and clotting factors. So this is all about our blood coagulation, just reading from our textbook. So next we'll continue our detailed explanations on blood grouping.